I want to welcome everybody to the November 18th Planning Commission meeting. Can we hear our announcements, please?
Before we begin the agenda, the Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Commission and the Wichita-Sedgwick County Board of Zoning Appeals would like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to this public hearing. For those in attendance, copies of the agenda for today's meeting, the public hearing procedure, and Planning Department staff reports on all agenda items are available in the lobby. The Planning Commission's and the BZA's bylaws limit the applicant on a zoning, subdivision, or variance application and his or her representatives to a total of 10 minutes of speaking time at the start of the hearing on that item, plus up to 2 minutes at the conclusion of that hearing. All other persons wishing to speak on agenda items are limited to 3 minutes per person. However, if they feel that it is needed and justified, the chairman may extend these times by up to 2 minutes. All speakers are requested to state his or her name and address for the record when beginning to speak. When you are finished speaking, please share your name, address, and the case number on the sheet provided in the room. This will enable staff to notify you if there are any additional proceedings concerning that item. All speakers at the podium, please remove your face mask before speaking into the microphone. Please note that all written and visual materials you present to the commission and the board will be retained by the secretary as part of the official record. If you are not speaking, but you wish to be notified about future proceedings on a particular case, please provide your contact information to the Planning Department. The Planning Commission and the Board are interested in hearing the views of all persons who wish to express themselves on all the agenda items. However, we ask that all speakers please be as courteous and concise as possible and avoid long repetitions of facts or opinions which have already been stated. For your information, the Wichita City Council has adopted a policy for all city zoning items. A copy of this policy is available from the planning staff. The City Council relies on a written record of the Planning Commission hearings and does not conduct its own additional public hearings on these items. The decision of the BZA is final. Any appeal of a decision of the BZA is to the district court.
Yes, thank you. Okay, the first item, we're going to have a roll call. And the reason for this, since not everybody's in the same room, that way we got the right number on the votes. I also ask if any one of the commission members decide to leave, to notify us so that we can still keep the number right.
Thank you, sir. First one is Bill Johnson.
Here.
Fox. Here. John McKay, I believe, is absent. Gross.
Here.
Green.
Here.
Dool.
Here.
Blick.
Present.
Nix.
Here.
Foster.
Here.
Warren.
Here.
Joe Johnson. I see him, sir, on the video. Miles.
Here.
Hartman.
Here.
Florence.
Here.
That is 13 members present, sir.
Okay, thank you. First item is approve the minutes of the Planning Commission meeting on November 4th. And I know Mr. Green has to abstain. Is there anybody else?
And this Josh Blick. Blick has to.
Yes, I do.
Move for approval.
Joe Johnson moved for approval. Do I
I'll
have a
second.
Second.
Who was that? Okay. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay,
Abstain. Aye.
Yeah, one or two abstentions.
Same.
The first item on the agenda today, we're going to go through these items to see how we can take on consent. The one's 2.1 subdivision item 2021-00046. Final plat, Bella Crossing addition. Is there anyone on the commission want to hear this case? Anybody in the chamber here want to hear that case? How about anybody virtual want to hear that case? Seeing now, we can take that on consent.
Move to approve. Second.
Got a motion by Mr. Warren, second by Mr. Green. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Now the vacation cases. 3.1, which is a vacation case 2021-00043. Vacate a portion of a platted setback. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? Anybody in the commission chamber want to hear this case? Anybody virtual? Take that on consent. The next one is vacation case 2021-00044. Request to vacate a portion of a platted setback and setback established by vacation ordinance on light industrial property, northwest corner of Southwest Street and West Erie Street. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? Anybody in the chamber want to hear this case? Anybody virtual want to hear this case? We can take that on consent.
I move for approval of items 3.1 and 3.2.
Second. Second, Fox.
Got a motion to approve 3.1 and 3.2 by Mr. Hartman, second by Ms. Fox. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, now we're going to go to public hearing items. 4.1, we're going to have to hear since it was staff recommend denial. So 4.2, conditional 2021-00049. Anybody want, this is a 14522 East 63rd Street South. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? Anybody in the chamber want to hear this case? How about virtual? Take that on consent. The next one is 2021-00046, 5700 West 23rd Street North. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? Anybody in the chamber want to hear this case? Anybody virtual? Take that on consent. I'm going to have to abstain from item 4.3. Mr. Chairman, Scott.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I've been informed by staff that there is an individual who spoke at the DAB, and that was on case 4.2. I'm sorry, 4.3. There's an individual who spoke at the DAB. It appears that they do not, they're online, the name is Libby, and it appears that they do not have the sound on. Yeah.
Libby, can you hear us?
Philip, I don't believe that she's got her audio working. And that was 4.3.
Right, this was the handout that is at your desk. This was the individual who put that handout together. So I just find it interesting that she's online but didn't speak up that they wanted to hear this case when they were present at the DAB last night to have discussion. I just don't want it to get missed.
Mr. Chairman, what I could suggest is that since you have an item that you will be hearing, and you do have an item that looks like you may take by consent, you can take the item the one item, 4.2, by consent now. You may hear the item 4.1, and then you could go to the item 4.3 and see if anyone does want to hear that case, if Libby has their microphone working and wishes to hear it. And if not, you'd
I
set
move
the
for
option.
approval of 4.2.
Okay, with that said, then we're going to take 4.2 on consent.
Joe did. I heard him.
Second, Josh.
Joshua Blick, second. I know it's hard to hear.
Got a motion to approve. And second, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, that carries. We'll go back to 4.1.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Kathy Morgan for the Planning Department. This is a conditional use request to allow a one-vehicle campground for a recreational vehicle out in the county by Clearwater. The property site, this is zone rural residential. Go to the next slide, please. Currently, this lot is vacant. There is a 40 by 60 foot concrete pad there, but there's no permanent buildings on the site. Next. And this is the future growth area. The proposed conditional use is not in conformance with the community investments plan because there is no primary structure on this site. And we have had conditional uses for single RV campgrounds before that have been denied where there's no primary structure on the site. Next, please. This is the site plan that the applicant submitted. And it's showing the concrete pad. They do have a water well and a septic system there. There was a manufactured home on the site before, and it burned down, and so it's been vacant since then. Next, please. This is looking at the site. So this is the fifth wheel trailer that they are requesting the one vehicle campground, recreational vehicle campground for. Next. This is looking northeast. That's what you see on the left is the driveway of the property to the west. Next. This is looking east on 51st Street. That is a gravel street. The properties are set well back from the street right-of-way. Next. This is you're looking at the house to the east of the subject site. North of the subject site is agricultural land. There's no improvements on that land. Next. This is the house south of the site. This is a subdivision that was developed in 1969. It was developed for mobile homes, and so the lots are about right around an acre, some less, but not more than an acre and a half. Next. This is again looking southwest to the next property east of the one you just saw. Next. This is the property directly west of the subject site. Next. And so staff is recommending denial of this request, as I said before, because of the fact that it does not have a permanent structure on it. And should the Planning Commission want to consider approval, you have a list of conditions that were added to your staff report. That it recognizes that it's just for a single recreational vehicle. The site does have water and sewer, which the recreational vehicle can be hooked into. It has to be maintained in general compliance with all codes. The conditional use shall be declared null and void upon issuance of a certificate of occupancy for a permanent structure on the site or after a period of 3 years from the date of approval of the said conditional use, whichever occurs first. And then the usual, if zoning administrator finds that there is a violation, then with concurrence with the planning director, this can be declared null and void. And I will answer any questions.
Any questions? Kathy?
Have we ever approved a single RV request like this before?
There was one that was approved down by Derby that was on an agricultural farmland that they wanted to have the RV for a temporary, to use it for camping, for hunting and things like that. And it did have requirements that the RV had to be moved off the land. I think it was every 6 months.
But it wasn't in a neighborhood like this one is.
No, it was not.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Do the applicants live adjacent to this property?
No, they do not, but Brandon, I believe is their younger brother. The applicant is in the audience, and so he can answer that question.
Any other questions of Kathy? Seeing none. Applicant
Hey Kathy, I got a
or
question.
agent, please come forward, state your name and address, and you got 3 minutes.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman, I believe Mr. Blick online had a question. It's very faint.
Go ahead, Mr. Blick.
Can you hear me, Kathy? Sorry.
Barely.
Is that better?
Barely, but go ahead.
Question I have is, this is being a conditional use. What if they remove the trailer for a certain amount of time? Does it go back, or is it just 3 years?
It's my understanding that the applicant is not intending to keep it there full-time, so they may move it off the site and bring it back. Again, that's something that the applicant can answer.
Thank you.
Okay, then.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Darling. That's JONDARLING. And
Your address?
my address is P.O. Box 153 /205 Clady. That's KLADY in Alden, Kansas. And on this property, I wanted to mention at least a couple of things.
Okay.
Is the property does have a permitted new water line pump. It has new electrical put in, and it's got a new septic system put in with more lateral lines than I've ever been used to. Where I'm from, one line does it. But it was mentioned that there was no other RV, somebody living in an RV on the in that area. Well, I don't know how big your area consists of, but in that community, I know of at least one other RV where the people are living in the RV. Now, I don't know any circumstances about it. My circumstances is I was just needing a place for my oldest boy to live temporarily. But the purpose of this property is my wife and I want to build a small home. I don't know if we would call it a tiny home or not, because all my kids live in or around this area, and my wife and I live so far away, we want to build a place on it to where we can come and stay for the weekend. We don't have to intrude on them. And it's taking us longer. I'm an old country boy. I'm not used to permits and all these procedures. And we're finding out some of them kind of the hard way. But because my wife and I got a deal, I got it with me, that we were in violation. And we talked to the person that gave us the violation that, because I guess it is a misdemeanor, and I wanted to take care of that. I'm 57 years old, never been in trouble with the law, don't need any record, don't need a misdemeanor, don't need a felony for sure. And he said that, I think his name was Kevin, off the top of my head. He said that it was a miscommunication with that. He said, don't worry about it, it's a miscommunication, I'll take care of that part of it. I said, okay. And trying...
Mr. Darling?
Yes.
Your time's up.
My time is up.
You need more time?
Could I have just a little bit?
How much?
As the applicant is it. You've got 10 minutes.
Oh, I'm
You have 10
sorry.
minutes?
I'm sorry.
You have more time.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
And so we were planning on building the place ourselves. And trying to get that done is, I'd rather go to the dentist. But, so there's a place that builds tiny homes north here on Broadway. It's about halfway in between Wichita or Park City and Newton. Sets on the east side of Broadway. Well, then the price of wood went skyrocketing. So we backed off a little bit. And I've been looking into reclaimed wood, looking into something like that that's a little bit cheaper. And it's just a very slow process. And then I was needing a place for my oldest boy to live. Things kind of come down. I know you don't want to hear about my woes and everything, but the biggest struggle is just trying to get there's an old saying, getting your ducks in a line. Well, some of my ducks have flew away, and I've had to recapture them. So I'm asking, I know it's just going to be temporary because I would have started construction already, but with the COVID situation and trying to get the right permits, getting the time and getting in, because I'm used to just walking in, taking my turn and whatnot. Well, then you got to do everything by phone. It's just been crazy. I'm asking for the permit because in that community, I've seen others doing it. I have seen other lots that don't even come close to the lot that I bought. And I don't know if I can mention it or not, but their yards are, well, let's just say they need a little TLC. My lot's not that way. I've kept it mowed, I've kept it trimmed up, I've planted a couple little trees in there in the front because it didn't have much. And eventually, like I said, I want to build a place on there for my wife and I. And that's kind of the main focus. I just can't snap my fingers and have a place built. I will say that I am fully aware, everything has a permit except for the concrete slab. And I'm working on getting it permitted, and if I have to, I'll tear the whole thing out, haul it off, and redo the foundation or the slab to meet the standard permit requirements to put a house on it. Like I said, I've kind of finding things out, getting the cart ahead of the horse a couple of times, but I'm finding out what I need to do kind of as I go along here. But I need a little time, and as by having a permit issued for, they call it an RV park. I wouldn't call it an RV park. It's just a place to stay while we're getting everything else in line. And I don't know, I think you had a question that you asked Kathy that she said I could answer for you.
Mr. Darling, the staff reports, they show 5 items. If the commission decides to approve this, are you in agreement with them 5 items?
I don't have that with me, them 5 items. What?
Recreational vehicle.
Oh, these 5 here? Yeah.
You already have the water.
We have the well, electric, septic. Yep.
It's only for one
One.
recreational vehicle.
Yep.
And that once you get a certificate of occupancy for a dwelling, then the recreational campground will be voided. Or
Right.
if it's if it takes more than 3 years, you're gonna have to reapply.
I'm fully aware of all that. Yep. I am. Yes, sir.
Okay, any questions of the applicant? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have one.
Go ahead.
In essence, all of this will be is a construction trailer on a work site. Am I right?
I didn't hear that. I'm kind of hard of hearing.
Did you hear that?
Yes, sir, I think the question was, in general, this would be similar to a construction trailer on a work site. Is that correct?
Well, not really, because, not really, because we have backed up, and we were going to, like I said earlier, we were going to build the house ourselves, but we've put that aside. The site that would build the house, they would build it and then bring it in and set it. So there would be no construction equipment, nothing there, other than the day, or I'm not sure how many days it would take, but I wouldn't think it'd take more than a day or two to bring it in, set it, and then they'd leave, from my understanding. So there would be no construction stuff there.
Ms. Fox?
Do you have any permanent or regular schedule for this to occur, or you have no idea when that will occur? The purchase of the house and the moving on the site, do you have any date that you plan to have that accomplished?
Well, sometime within this 3-year for this permit, but as soon as I get this permit, it'll give me the time that I need, because I'm finding out that it's time that's the value. I can't speed things up any quicker. I hope to have it started and done within the first year of, if this is passed, starting it within the first year. I know the place that builds this, that I'm working with, they're on a 6-month, once you submit and pay, they're on a 6-month build and set. Well, if there's 1 or 2 in front of me, then that pushes me off. I couldn't, I wanted to go ahead and get that started first, but then I'd be like, what am I gonna do with it if something doesn't go?
You answered my question. Just to follow up, will you be living in this, or will your son be living in this?
Well, we will be living, my wife and I will eventually be living in the
The new
permanent.
home, but the RV, it would
permanent
be a son.
structure. Because, like I said earlier, all our kids live down. I got 3 kids. They all live down here in Wichita or the surrounding area. We drive an hour and a half, 2 hours. And
Right now, will your son live in the RV?
Yes.
Okay.
Right now, he'll live there in the, there's 2 reasons for that.
I don't
Okay.
need to know reasons, just I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions of the applicant?
Yeah, I do. Hey, can I give you a clarification? When I asked him about the construction trailer, because anytime you're going to do a building, you're allowed a construction trailer through the duration of the process, and it does not really define what it looked like and what it what actually you do in it. So that's why I asked that question.
That's probably a staff answer.
Good afternoon, J.R. Cox, Metropolitan Planning. Mr. Florence, I think to answer the question, you're correct. There are construction uses permitted, construction trailers, offices and such. But this is an RV, and that's not what this is. It's a different matter, and it's also in the county.
So JR, if I can provide a clarification on that, or just make sure I understand it correctly. The difference between a construction trailer and what's being proposed at this site is that this one would be for a residence, whereas a construction trailer is generally for an office. Is that right?
That's correct, and it's during a construction project only.
Thank you. Mr. Warren?
Mr. Darling, obviously in this area, they manufacturer properties are okay because we've already seen pictures of others in the area. What I don't know, and I don't know if you know or if staff knows, if there are any restrictive covenants in the area that, in terms of limited the amount of square footage, there's.
Just for other than what
You bet, sorry. There's no limited square footage on the size of the footprint of the structure on the lot.
For the lots, okay, that was my question.
Yeah, Mr. Darling, you were saying, looking at the aerial, the most recent aerial, there is a 40 by 60 foot slab, which you mentioned.
Yes.
And when you bought the lot, that slab was already there, I assume?
Yes.
Okay. My concern about allowing you to have a conditional use on this, I didn't see anywhere in the staff report. Now, you have indicated something differently, but in the staff report, it indicated that there was no intent of putting a permanent structure. It was just going to be a place for you, for somebody to live, your son. And then during your testimony, you mentioned something about maybe a tiny home or a manufactured home of some sort. Is your intent to have, if that slab is approved and you have it permitted, is your intent to have something that size that would fit that 40 by 60 foot slab? Are you looking at something smaller than that? And would it be a permanent structure as opposed to, say, some of these tiny homes I've seen are kind of just glorified motor home, not motor homes, but mobile homes, trailers that you can drag from place to place?
No, this would be a permanent structure. And the slab, it wouldn't be the size of a 40 by 60. It wouldn't take up that whole 40 by 60 slab. What we looked at was 20 20 by 40, and only taking up a small section of that slab. That's why if I have to tear up the slab to put some, we've also looked at, but there was some requirements, if I recall off the top of my head, for like a mobile home, or or not a camper, but a mobile home, 16 by 60. But there are some requirements to the size of the mobile home, from what I can kind of recall. I'd have to get that information again and look at it.
So it is, it would be a permanent structure that you're looking at?
It's going to be a permanent structure.
Yeah, the other thing that I see is, I know that typically it takes maybe 6 months 6 to 8 months for an average build for just a regular home, from start to finish, depending upon the size and, what's all involved with the house itself. Would 3 years to me seems like a long time for that process to take place. Would you need the full 3 years if we were to give you this conditional use? Would you be able to accomplish it in, say, a couple of years?
Well, like I said, I hope to have it done within the first year and then just let this permit go off to the wayside. But with what I'm finding is having the extra little time for hiccups, because I can't control what other people do, and I can't control what the build is going to be like. If they start the build and, God forbid, the company goes belly up, then I got to start over. When they said the permit would be good for 3 years, I have no problem with that because I know I can get something done. If I have to call my family in and have them all come out and grab a hammer and nails and we'll build it. And then trying to get, but by doing it myself, then I got to hire the electricians to get the permit. By them doing it, it saves me a big headache. And that's so, I don't have a problem with the having it done within 3 years. I hope to have it done within the first year. The extra time is just...
Sir, I think you've answered his question.
Okay.
Thank you.
I got a question. So to save yourself some problems, why don't you just move a mobile home in there like everybody else?
Because I personally have lived in a mobile home. I got no problem with that. My wife and I wanted something more home-like. Because, like I said, I'm 57 years old. I'm still a young buck, but we want something other than a mobile home. Something that looks, that's just our preference.
Ms. Foster?
Your plans to put the tiny home on are actually a separate issue from the recreational vehicle that's being lived in or going to be lived in by your son. How long do you think your son would be in this recreational vehicle on this site?
Well, and up to the point to where we've got the permanent structure there, because I'm not from a big city. I'm from the backwoods country. We wanted him there for security.
Okay.
And because if we were going to build it ourselves, I didn't want to bring a truckload of lumber in and then 2 days later have that truckload of lumber be gone. I wanted somebody there.
So in other words, it'll be gone once you're in a permanent residence? RV?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here would like to speak on this item in the chamber? Is there anybody virtual? Anybody virtual? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to commission. I'm going to make a couple comments, and I don't know. I lived just north of this area for probably 28, 30 years. At one time, it was probably a pretty good double-wide mobile home subdivision. You drive down there now, there's a lot of rundown stuff. And there's still some nice stuff. And I guess personally, I'd like to see somebody build something new in that area. But
Chairman, I see we had 7 people that either called or emailed that were opposed to this. I'm just curious as to what they said. We haven't seen any of the emails or heard about any of the phone calls, but what's the major?
And Mr. Hicks, we thought there'd be some virtual and talk about it.
What's that?
We thought there'd be some calling in on that, but
Yeah, but they've talked to Kathy. She's gotten emails, right?
Well, I've had a conversation with about 4 people out there, and then they sent in the attached opposition statement, and basically they don't want the area to turn into an RV park, was what it was. They didn't want an RV campground in their neighborhood.
Commissioner Nix, I noticed also that, Commissioner Nix, I noticed also that 3 or 4 of those people that were opposed to it, they also signed a document for it, it looked like.
Hey, Kathy, can you go through I'm looking at the packet and I just see this page. I'm not sure. If you open up the packet and you look at page 11, that's the one that's got a list of names and addresses. If there's something more than that, can you please describe what that is?
Yes, I can. Okay, so it did not get attached. I received a 3-page document from the neighbors that had their signatures and their street address that were opposed to allowing the RV campground for the single RV siting.
Kathy, did they know that it might be just for 3 years?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
That it was temporary and that the applicant was going to place
Cassie, did they understand the deal of a conditional use versus just an outright?
It was explained to them now whether they.
In fact, if there wasn't going to be a future home there, I wouldn't be in favor of this all. But
Yeah.
that kind of changed my opinion.
I would say between 35 and 40. Yeah. They had a page that had 15 spaces on it, and they were mostly, one page was full, the other 3 pages were not all the way full, so I feel comfortable with saying 35.
They were all people that were against it, right?
Yes, other than these 2 that you see on what was attached. And they had called in and said they were in favor of it because the property was being kept up and they had met the owners.
Okay. Mr. Warren.
I think 3 years probably is a little bit more than they need, but in these kinds of conditions and what we've seen the last couple of years, I don't mind giving them that, instead of going from a 2-year, I like the idea of a 3-year just in case things happen. I don't see that as that big of an issue. I'm going to move to approve as presented and including the staff requirements listed on, what page was that?
3.
Page 3? 3 and 4?
I would second that.
Got a motion by Mr. Warren, second by Mr.
Question.
Darrell?
Carroll. I just want to say something. I think that Mr. Warren's making a very good comment. Delivery of materials today is totally different. Been in business 60 years. We order a new structure for a future addition or a new building, it's out 1 year. We're doing a pool house for an individual that's a friend. We were told the windows will be available. Now that's going to be 19 weeks. So what you think's going to happen and what happens, it's totally changing daily. Mr. Scott?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. As you all are discussing, I just wanted to remind about findings, and I believe that I may have heard one in your discussion, which is that in terms of the use and character of the neighborhood, that this is a transitional stage that the property will be in until a more permanent structure is placed on the site that's more compatible with the existing structures in the area. But just want to comment findings. Helpful.
I would agree with that, and I think that what I'm hearing is the big concern is this turning into a RV park, and nothing in what we're doing, would lend us to that end.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciated your brief comment on if there was not going to be a permanent structure built here, then I would definitely be opposed to this. But it appears as though it sounds like there is going to be a permanent structure of some sort. So I would be in favor of the motion.
Any other discussion?
So if we approve this, that means if there is no permanent structure in place and occupied by the end of the 3-year period, then they would be in violation and the RV would have to go.
Correct.
I could support it then.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody opposed? That item passes. Now we go to 4.3. Mr. Scott?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, on that one, we had again recognized that there was an individual who had spoken at the DAB on this meeting. We have contacted that individual by means that we have, which is email, and we have not heard anything from them. We still. Oh, okay, I have an update from that. It sounds like she is online and she should be able to speak now, so, Ms. Libby, do you hear us? Can you speak?
Yes. Do you all hear me?
Okay.
Yes, are you guys hearing me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so the first thing I would ask was
Miss Libby, Miss Libby,
Could you-
excuse me, Miss Libby. Miss Libby, first we're going to ask the staff to present your case so that we all hear the situation, and then we'll call on you to respond with your concerns. Thank you.
I apologize.
We just want to make sure we can hear you.
Thank you.
So,
Go ahead, Philip.
Yep, zone 2146 is a zone change request from SF5 to general commercial with the intended use of building a warehouse self-storage unit as well as a vehicle storage yard. The applicant also provided a protective overlay that we'll be discussing as well. That would provide some restrictions and other things as a means to mitigate impacts of the development concerning the residential character or residential structures nearby. Let's just go through the plans real quick and the site plan and the pictures to give you a general idea of what the area looks like. This is the site now. The aerial is not, they have since removed right here. So this is the house built in 1920. This is a residential structure that is not there anymore. I don't know if it would have been non-conforming anyway if it had 2 residences on it, but that's not there anymore. The applicant's plan is to raise the site and to redevelop it anyway. But it's a fairly large site. It's unplatted. Platting is a requirement before they can get building permits. Platting would take care of access, drainage, things of that nature regarding development on the site. Something to note, right down here, it's right at the edge of the aerial, is a vehicle storage yard that was approved several years ago in the area, just as a reference point. Next. The comprehensive plan identifies it as suitable for residential, but something we'll discuss as well as you can see in the purple, that's appropriate use for limited industrial or just industrial uses. Something we'll speak about is how commercial uses can be used as a buffer to buffer down the use intensities to help protect the residential neighborhoods or residential structures nearby. Next picture, please. This is a conceptual site plan. There will have to be some additional work done on it, but you'd see that they're proposing a larger driveway here and a possible driveway off of Hoover. There is concern about whether or not that drive can actually exist on Hoover. That will be addressed during plating as well. There's access management standards for arterial roads, and that will be taken into consideration by the traffic engineering as to whether or not that would meet access standards and whether or not that drive could actually exist. The other thing that this site plan does not account for is off-street parking requirements. It's based off of the square footage of floor area for storage. And so they have it pretty packed tightly in there, and there's actually no space accounting for the off-street parking requirement. The staff report has a matrix of what that could look like if they were to do a full build-out. So likely this concept will have to change based on needing to accommodate off-street parking. Next. These are pictures from around the area. This is looking north at the site. That's the house that was built in 1920. Next picture. This is looking to the northwest at the rest of the site. There's other additional accessory structures on there, relatively in disrepair. You can see that 23rd Street is gravel. Next picture. This is looking northwest at the site. I'm actually on the site of the existing vehicle storage yard. That's catty-corner to the southeast of it, looking at the corner property. Next picture. This is looking to the northeast across Hoover at houses that would face directly at the Hoover frontage of this site. Next picture. This is looking at that vehicle storage yard. You can see they have a 6-foot solid fence and some landscaping in front of it. This is at the intersection of 23rd and Hoover. Next picture. This is looking at the structure. Hoover's right in front of us. The property we're talking about is on the right-hand side of the picture. 23rd Street is going this way. That's where that cement truck is. So this house faces Hoover. The storage facility would actually front 23rd Street on the side of this property. Next picture. This is further down 23rd Street at the industrial properties west of the site. Next picture. And just another picture of what those industrial properties look like. Next picture. Okay, if we want to go back, probably the aerial is the best one to land on for right now. So as I said before, it's a condition or a zone change to GC for warehouse, self-storage, and vehicle storage yard. My understanding is that the vehicle storage yard is more of, not accessory, but just an ancillary use as they build more warehouse self-storage. The primary purpose of the zone change is to provide the warehouse self-storage, but he likely will have vehicle storage yard as a component, and the ratio may change over time as his storage business potentially gets more successful. He could build more buildings and actually reduce the size of the vehicle storage yard over time. Obviously, time will tell as to what that balance would look like and whether or not vehicle storage yard will remain on the site or eventually just be moved off the site because he has the business to support more self-storage uses. Talked about the site plan and how it showed the possible layout of all the storage facilities. The vehicle storage yard was not pictured in the site plan. Given the unrestricted limited industrial zoning to the south, the request for general commercial restricted by a protective overlay is not unreasonable. The overlay has prohibited uses in GC and restricts signage that would make it more appropriate for the residential context that is surrounding it. We talked about how they wanted to close one of the drives on the west, enlarge a drive on 23rd Street, and possibly have a drive on Hoover. Access will be determined at the time of platting. Properties to the north and east are zoned single-family residential. We saw what those houses look like. Property south of it, it's single family right here, but as you go about halfway down the site to this way, it's immediately limited industrial. So it's kind of a mixed bag of like very intense zoning right next to very restricted zoning. Property to the west is single family, but it had a conditional use for extraction. And as I mentioned before, as you go further west down 23rd Street, there's limited industrial. There's also limited industrial. If you go to the zoning map, there's limited industrial to the east here and industrial park zoning right here. This is also like a condominium storage facility right here, right abutting single-family residential in the area as well. So again, very intense uses, right dab smack on property lines with very restricted uses in this area. Because the site is surrounded by residential zoning, the landscape ordinance and screening does apply. That's minimum of a 6-foot fence anywhere it's abutting residential zoning, in addition to 1 tree per 40 feet for the landscape buffer. Also requires a landscape street yard along Hoover as well as 23rd Street. Technically, the landscape street yard would only be where it is across the street from residential zoning. The applicant is proposing a 10-foot landscape strip along the entire frontage of 23rd Street. So it's actually above and beyond the landscaping that would normally be required. They are required to have the landscape street yard along Hoover as well. They've indicated that they'll likely have a fence along the Hoover frontage as well for a security purpose. So you'd have screening as well as landscaping along the Hoover frontage. We talked about off-street parking. I'm not going to go into the weeds because there's not a defined amount of storage space that they're going to be able to have. The site plan will have to be manipulated in order to accommodate that parking, and so it all depends on what your final square footage of storage will be. It will depend on how many spaces they have to provide. It's just that they will have to accommodate the off-street parking requirement. Compatibility setbacks are in play. That would be a 25-foot setback along any property that has abutting SF5 zoning. The height cannot exceed 35 feet within 50 foot of a property line that is SF5 as well. It could be TF3, but there's no TF3 zoning in the area. Mentioned before that plating is required in order to get a building permit. 23rd Street is gravel. Hoover is a paved 2-lane arterial road. There's plans. I was at DAB last night. The neighbors informed me of some other plans that I was not fully had the details of, but there are plans of Public Works of widening Hoover from a 2-lane to a 3-lane, and including multi-use path on both sides of the street. So through the plating process, there might even be some additional right-of-way acquired. Not really sure, not really super germane to this, but how Hoover is right now, it will be changing sometime in the future. Water and sewer are nearby, but would have to be extended if they are required on the site, and that's at the applicant's expense. Again, more on the plating side of things. The proposed zone change with the overlay is not in conformance to the comprehensive plan when it comes to the future land use plan. As we said, that's residential uses, but where it is in conformance is in the locational guidelines. That's where I talked about having commercial uses that are less intensive, like a storage yard, being a buffer from unrestricted limited industrial zoning, which could support anything within LI, and that's unrestricted, using this as a buffer from all of these residential properties to the north. So in the locational guidelines for the comprehensive plan, that is something that it could be in conformance with and used as a strategy to help buffer those more intensive uses. The Wichita Police for People Plan, it's right on the border. That was that blue line that cut halfway through the property, so we're going to count it as being in. It's supported by strategy number 6, which encourages infill and redevelopment that is contextual to the environment in which it's occurring. We've talked about all of the industrial properties and commercial properties that are nearby, so it's not unreasonable for them to request the zone change that they're requesting at this time. Staff is recommending approval subject to the protective overlay. It's listed there. There's quite a bit to it. If you have any specific questions about it, we can address them at that time. One thing I wanted to bring up, and Miss Libby here, is the generator of this handout that's at your desk. I also emailed it to you guys earlier in the week. They are not in opposition to the request. They just would like some consideration about possibly changing the way it could be developed. One of the things they're asking is for the zoning to only be limited commercial. The issue with that is warehouse self-storage can be an LC, but it would require conditional use, and they did not apply for that. And vehicle storage yard is not a permitted use in limited commercial at all. So a way that could be done is the protective overlay language could be amended to restrict the uses to LC in addition to all the prohibited uses that are under item number 11, but then only allow the warehouse self-storage and the vehicle storage yard as permitted in GC, effectively doing the same, that if you don't have a warehouse self-storage or a vehicle storage yard, you're only allowed uses in limited commercial except those prohibited in the list. Does that make sense? So effectively accomplishing the same thing. It's just allowing the applicant to do what they wish, and because those uses are permitted in GC, but then if those are not the uses that actually happen on the site, it can only be uses done in LC, which is what the neighbors are requesting. So it's kind of the compromise in the middle. They're also asking that the entrances only be allowed on 23rd Street. We have had protective overlays in the past restrict access. We did one for a commercial property down on South Hillside where it traversed from Hillside back to a neighborhood street in the back, so they technically had access off of that neighborhood street in the back, and we did restrict their access off of that neighborhood street with a protective overlay. Again, it would also be done, looked at the time of platting, so it's just something for you to consider. They're also requesting that the vehicle storage yard be located on the farthest west portion of the property, furthest away from the residential uses and closest to the industrial uses. And that landscaping along Hoover be consistent or like a picture that they provided to you at DAB last night. There was a discussion about possibly an 8-foot fence, potential berming, or just maybe some more beefed up landscaping than what the minimum requirement is. DAB did not have a quorum last night, so it just stayed as a discussion. There's no formal recommendation, but the discussion from the DAB was amenable to many of these things that the neighbor was requesting. The agent for the applicant was there that evening and felt that most of those requests were not necessarily unreasonable per se, but I can let them speak on it from their perspective. And I'll let the neighbor speak more about their plan and provide some more context for the reasons behind what they suggested. I just wanted to provide some commentary specifically about the zone request of how you can't just make it limited commercial zoning because that doesn't allow the uses that the applicant is wishing to do. So, as I mentioned, staff is recommending approval subject to that protective overlay. We don't have those details in our protective overlay. Those would have to be added if you wanted to take into consideration some of the neighbors' requests. That language would have to be updated in the protective overlay as part of your recommendation today. And with that, I think I'll stand for any questions you might have for me.
Any questions for Philip? Mr. Warren?
Philip, if I'm hearing this right, basically, the folks that came up with this would do the same thing that we're allowing to do now, just would make the whole process more cumbersome with more documentation and paperwork and additional overlays and additional uses and...
No, I apologize if I did not explain that clearly. What they're asking for can be accomplished with the protective overlay. It would just be amending the language of the protective overlay. Regarding the zoning and the uses, the protective overlay language would say those uses as permitted in or restricted to limited commercial except the vehicle or the vehicle storage yard and the warehouse self-storage as permitted in general commercial. So the zoning would be general commercial and it would only allow the two uses. Everything else would be restricted back to LC. So we're not adding conditional uses. We're not adding other overlays or encumbrances. It's just whether or not we're going to change staff recommendation of the protective overlay to accommodate additional language.
Okay, Mr. Go ahead.
The storage units to the southeast of this, do they have their access off of Hoover?
They do.
And do you know why they're objecting to the access on this project?
If you go back to the aerial, When you go further south on Hoover, there's fewer driveways, and that property only has access off of Hoover. It's not a corner property. So if they didn't have access off of Hoover, they wouldn't have access at all. I believe the concern is when you look at this strip along Hoover here, it's not, I don't remember what the distance is, but it's not very far. And you have all of these residential driveways. 23rd Street is offset. This is actually the continuance of 23rd Street, in addition to these residential driveways as well. So having additional access could actually potentially be dangerous. I also think they were just wanting to limit the commercial traffic onto 23rd Street as a means to help mitigate the possible negative impact to their properties being across the street versus having the commercial traffic being on Hoover, since they do have a much wider frontage along 23rd Street, and you could just route all the customer traffic onto 23rd and not in and out on Hoover.
I guess what I see on that, well, two things. One, I'm sure that will be an interesting discussion during the plating process after the traffic engineer has a chance to look at that. The other side of that is, though, I would more consider Hoover to be more or less an arterial. And so there again, it's going to be a discussion that traffic engineering has.
Right.
And
They
with
have
that being an
access management
arterial,
standards,
it'll be an interesting discussion.
They'll look at the distances between the driveways and the intersections and all of that and make a determination.
Sure.
Mr. Nix?
I had the same concerns, or the same observations that Mr. Green had. And maybe this is the appropriate time, but at some point in time, will West 23rd Street be paved? Is there a chance, I mean, given the kind of business that we have up and down 23rd now? And
Possibly. That's something we can speak with Public Works on whether or not the city would take that on, or if it would have to go through the standard petition process that property owners can enter into with the city.
Yeah. To call it a gravel road is not exactly right. It's
Mr.
more or less
Hartman?
a sand
The-
road.
One of the other comments on this sheet was they wanted to locate the outdoor vehicle storage across from, not across from residential, so that would limit them to just there along 23rd where they're adjacent to the industrial.
The handout you had is actually updated where they're amenable to being it very, very much on the west side, where though it's this very west property is zoned single family, it's not developed residentially. And then you have the limited industrial properties down here, but basically if you put it as far west, it is away from the majority of the single family residential houses.
So this isn't right where it says existing limited industrial?
Correct. The property
it's
to the
vacant.
west has a conditional use, but the zoning is single family.
Mr. Green?
Yeah, one other thing that I noted in the staff report, and also that is shown on our proposed development plan, the vehicle storage is not the primary purpose long-term for this development.
That is my understanding as well.
And I think the applicant or the agent for the applicant can address that further. But it appears as though the vehicle storage would be would be reduced in phases as the storage facility increases in numbers, so.
That is my understanding as well.
Okay.
Do any of our commissioners participating virtually have questions? Okay. Are you ready for the agent or applicant? Agent or applicant, and you have 10 minutes. We'd like your name and your address, please.
Burke Miller, K.E. Miller Engineering, 117 East Louis. I'm the agent. We worked with staff on the PO and everything, and I think we had a pretty good compromise between us and them as to what we wanted to do and to meet our goal, and they helped us to meet our goal, and we helped them to kind of mitigate how things are going around in the neighborhood. So we're fine with the staff comments. We have talked about the 8-foot that the neighbor wanted along Hoover Road, and we tend to think that 8 foot's going to make it look more like a fortress than just a regular fence would be. We'll have a solid fence there, but 8 foot versus 6 might be a little tall it might just look more, not be appealing, I guess is the best way to put it. You know, we want something that's going to look good where people are going to say, I want to go to that place. And we don't want something that may kind of trigger it the other way. And we will have the landscaping there because that's a requirement, the landscaping per ordinance, plus that additional 10 feet on that west side on 23rd Street. But otherwise, I think we're good with staff comments. We'd be glad to answer any questions or try to.
The 8 foot, is that just the neighborhood? That's not the staff?
Right, that was the
recommendations?
neighborhood.
Okay.
Can you address the vehicle storage component of that? Is the staff report accurate in what the applicants are?
Right, to build it out as time goes, yes. You know, you build the building, this first one's full, you start on the next one, it fills up, and work your way through it.
Right.
So, yeah, it's not the permanent solution. And right now, the site plan is in flux because of, you know, we still have to get it platted, find out where we stand with access and that type of thing, so.
How much?
We can't.
How much easement's going to be taken?
Easements, right-of-ways, the whole works, yeah. So that's kind of in flux too, but the idea is he'll start building structures and the rest of it will be vehicle storage.
So it's a workable thing for you to have vehicle storage on the far west while you're building on the east, or how do you see that staged?
At this point, it's hard to say where he's going to start. He may start on the east side with buildings. That somewhat makes sense, but again, it depends on access and that type of thing. But they will do what they can as far as trying to keep it further back into the property. But if you look, you've got, on the north, you've got residential, on the south, you have residential, and you know, there's zoned residential on the west, and you have east residential. There's going to be some that's going to be closer to residential than other areas for sure.
Okay. Any other questions for the agent? Hearing none, thank you.
Okay, thank
and
you.
We'll call you back for rebuttal after we've had comments from others. Anyone in chamber who wants to speak on this item? Miss Libby, we know you're out there virtual. Would you like to speak on this item? You have 3 minutes.
Yes. Okay. So it's my understanding you guys have the page that I submitted regarding just our feedback on having this done and what we would like to see happen in order to protect the value of our own property. It was mentioned about the storage yard directly. For me, I'm the house that's on the east side of Hoover, right where 23rd intersects.
Can you give us
storage yard that?
Can you give us your address, please, Libby? Miss Libby?
Yes, I'm sorry. It is 2370 North Hoover.
Thank you.
And I'm speaking on behalf of the residents located at 2365, 2370, 2372, and 2402. Nope, Hoover. So basically, the property directly at the southwest corner, then the 3 properties directly across there on Hoover on the east side.
Okay,
We
thank
good to go?
you. Continue.
Okay. So anyway, so the location that they're wanting to build at, like you said, it's currently single family. We understand that there is a lot of growth going on around here that's changing that to commercial. We would ask for the limited commercial for the share site of, trying to pull the neighborhood back together and protect the value of our homes around here. Where they are proposing to go into the property, the main entrance would be right off of Hoover, which, like was mentioned, there's, directly across from there's 3 driveways and a street in that small little strip. If you go down 23rd Street, it's directly across from commercial properties as well, or industrial as well, where everywhere else around there is residential. So we would ask the limited commercial, the location for entry be on 23rd Street. And then again, as he mentioned, the storage yard, we would ask that be closer back to where there is no residential. I guess I had labeled it wrong on the existing limited industrial. That must be part of that property. I don't know. There's a small strip there, but just on that side that you can see where it's all trees on the west side, that must be a small strip because thereafter is industrial land. Then lastly, I would just ask, he mentioned the storage yard that we currently have to the south of us. And last night it was discussed at the meeting, all the particulars on, he has a 6-foot fence, for example. One of the members of the DAB meeting mentioned how he drove by there and it doesn't look like that's doing anything to protect the neighbors, and that is exactly right. Everything that has been done over there, it's not been followed through on what he was supposed to do as far as landscaping goes along our property line. He was supposed to have a 15-foot buffer between our property line and himself. That's not happening. There's many things, and when you try to call to get somebody to follow up on the back end of things, that is like an act of Congress. So I'm trying to be on that front end to try to get ahead of it and have it documented so that things are followed through with.
Okay, Ms. Libby, your time is now up. Does anyone on the commission have questions for Ms. Libby? Mr. Green?
So your concerns are with, not only with this property, but property that's on the east side of 23rd? Is that what you were just describing to us?
So that property is an issue, but I was told whenever I talked to Philip about this that property wasn't going to be brought up at all. He mentioned the property, so I wanted to show that our concerns with that over there, if that's going to be figured into this as well, because this is directly.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out how that pertained to this, so thank you for that explanation.
Any other questions
Yes,
from commission? Any commissioners online with a question for the speaker? Hearing none, Mr. Kirk, do you want to respond? I'm sorry, anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this case?
Or anybody else?
Anyone else virtually who would like to speak on this case? Now, Mr. Kirk, would you like to respond? You have 2 minutes.
After that, I don't know if you have any questions. I'll be glad to try to answer them. But, she mentioned the property to the south. I looked at that. They've got issues, and I think a lot of that's more of an enforcement issue than how it was done. I'm not sure how it was done, but it's definitely an enforcement issue that is happening over there. And we will meet the requirements for the landscaping and the screening and everything else on this property, regardless of what happened across the street to the south of them. I mean, I feel bad for them as to what they have on the south, but we're planning on having something a lot nicer than that on our side.
Question,
Mr. Harden?
So your plan is to provide a 10-foot landscape buffer all along Hoover and then all along 23rd Street? Or
Along 23rd. Along Hoover, we still have to have our landscaping.
you don't have landscaping on Hoover, or you do?
No, we'll have landscaping on Hoover, yes. That's a requirement by code.
Right, and
So
then
it's gonna be,
on 23rd, along where it's adjacent to the residential?
Yes, right.
And
All the
then-
landscaping code will meet, yes.
And then your requirement will be a 6-foot solid screening fence around the entire property, basically, except for where it's adjacent to the
Right,
industrial?
right. They want it for security purposes, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions for the agent? Hearing none. What is the wish of the commission?
I'd like to make a comment, please. The entrances and exits issue that was brought up by the neighbors, to me, that seems something we ought to discuss more fully later during the platting process. the outdoor vehicle storage yard is going to be temporary wherever it is, and putting it on the west side just puts it still adjacent to a place that's zoned SF, but doesn't happen to have houses on it at the moment, but depending on how the timing works out, could have. The landscape plan, I think, is going to be what it is. So it basically comes down, as far as I can tell, to the zoning district change that the neighbors are requesting. And I'm not sure, if I understood Philip correctly, it's not really going to make any difference, is it? I mean, it's just a matter of the zone will officially change, but the actual function of what happens on this property is going to be the same, correct?
That is correct. Something, it's a visual, and Ms. Libby was able to see this last night at DAB because we were in person, but for your sake, on your number 11 in the protective overlay, in preparation for this, in relation to the comments, any of my stuff highlighted in yellow on my staff report are uses in LC that would be prohibited. The ones in pink are only the ones in GC that are prohibited. So if you change the language of the PO to restrict it to limited commercial, you're still taking out all of these as permitted uses in LC, and you're still allowing the warehouse self-storage and the vehicle storage yard. So you would have GC zoning, effectively only LC zoning that permits the two other uses. This fairly large list of prohibited uses still, so it's effectively doing the same thing, it's just how you want to write it.
Yeah, so this would be a precaution for a future in which this whole storage thing was gone of old age or whatever, and somebody else might come in and want to do something else
The one
on this
thing
property.
is the difference is right now, not all of the uses in GC are like the difference between LC and GC uses, not all of those are prohibited. There could be other GC uses, I don't have them off the top of my head, that could go into this site if a vehicle storage yard or a warehouse self-storage is not constructed or if it's redeveloped in the future. So what the neighborhood is requesting of restricting the uses to LC would take care of that. Those other uses in limbo that are not prohibited in GC right now, those would be effectively prohibited the way the neighbors are requesting it.
Okay, so from the perspective of a professional planner, do you see any problems with revising the language
No.
to? Okay.
And the way the discussion went at DAB last night, it was asked to Kirk, the agent, would that cause any hardship for the applicant that you know of? And there really wasn't, because what they want to do is a warehouse self-storage and a vehicle storage yard. So, prohibiting other uses in GC and writing the language to say it's restricted to LC didn't really have any issue with them either.
I'm ready to make a motion unless anybody has something else to bring up.
Any other comments? Let's proceed with your motion.
Okay, I would like to move to approve, subject to protective overlay 380 and staff comments, with the exception that the zoning district change be limited commercial instead of general commercial.
Well, the way it has to be is that the PO language it would still be general commercial, the PO language would just limit the uses to LC except for the two uses.
Okay, my apologies.
We'll start
It's confusing, you're fine,
We'll start again.
I got your intention.
Okay.
I just want to make sure it's
Scott's
stated
over there
correctly.
scribbling. He knows what I meant, right? The uses would be limited to LC uses
Except
in the
for
protective overlay.
warehouse, self-storage, and vehicle storage.
That's my motion.
Got it. I'm on the same page.
Are we clear on the motion? Approving
Staff is
the
clear.
zoning change to
And the
general
applicant's
commercial.
clear. I'm clear.
So I'll sum it up as best I can.
Okay,
So
thank you.
the motion is to approve, subject to staff comments, with the addition of item number 11 would be rephrased to say, our uses restricted to those in limited commercial, except warehouse self-storage and vehicle storage yard as permitted in general commercial, in addition to all of these prohibited uses. Does that make sense? So the zoning would still be general commercial. You're just restricting all of the uses back to limited commercial, except the two that the applicant is asking for.
So it's still going to be GC. But They won't be able to do anything except the two things that they would otherwise be able to do in LC. Does that make sense?
Do we have a second for this motion?
Such as it is.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Ms. Foster, second by Mr. Hartman. Discussion from the commission?
Yeah, will there be any limitations with regards to the structures that are built on the property, the buildings themselves? Are there going to be requirements that GC would allow that LC would not allow?
The staff report talks about the compatibility setbacks and height restrictions, so they're restricted to 35 feet. There's compatibility setbacks as well, so that effectively
Takes care of any of those.
mitigates the issues of being
I just don't want to have any
general commercial.
unforeseen issues crop up by changing what was originally presented and recommended.
And what we have here doesn't change the conditions of the other conditions of the PO. The other things that the PO addresses is that there's architectural designs in the PO, so they all have the consistent, feel and design to them. It also, in terms of signage, one of the things I can point out, because it would relate to a building, is that no illuminated building signs on the north or the west elevations of any buildings, basically to not have an illuminated building sign next to pointing at a house.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions from the commission? From those participating virtually? Any questions? I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. And we have one abstention. Is that correct? One abstention? Motion passes, 12 in favor, one abstention. Thank you, Philip. And we'll call the real chairman back.
Not the fake one.
Is there any non-public hearing items?
Do we not have to at least announce that the BZA is canceled?
No BZA, that is correct, for lack of items.
Do we need to announce that, or doesn't it matter?
I think bringing it up and vocalizing it just as we have will be good, so thank you.
Other non-public hearing items? Other matters? If not, we're adjourned.